This is a Fox News alert. Investigators in Texas revealing new information about the gunman who killed 26 innocent people at a small Baptist church. Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Perino, and this is the Daily Briefing. Witnesses tell the Associated Press that the gunman shot crying babies at point-blank range as he moved through the church aisle by aisle looking for victims. Investigators have recovered his phone, but say they're having a hard time accessing it.
Law enforcement, whether that's at the state, local, or the federal level, is increasingly not able to get into these phones. I can assure you that we're working very hard to get into the phone, and that will continue until we find an answer. I don't know how long that's going to be quite honest with you. It could be tomorrow, it could be a week, could be a month. We just don't know yet.
Adam Housley is live in Sutherland Springs, Texas. Adam, authorities say that the scope of this crime scene is extensive, and I guess we can understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything from a small piece of evidence like a cell phone to what's behind me, which is the church. We're getting a much clearer view now that they removed a portable investigative building they'd put up for about 24 hours, was taken down. It gives you a look at this church. Now, as you look at this church from this angle, to the right side of it, I'm told, now we can't go over there because it's still part of the crime scene, but one of the law enforcement officials out here told me on the right side, the wall is peppered with holes from where the gunman started shooting. Then he came around to the front wearing that black mask with a white face on it, a white skeleton face, and then he would enter the church after, again, shooting up that right side of the church from the outside. He would enter the inside and open fire. Stephen Williford is being called a hero. He refuses to say he is, but he would go to that same front of the church and engage the gunman. Take a listen.
I'm no hero. I am not. I think my God, my Lord, protected me and gave me the skills to do what needed to be done. And I just wish I could have gotten there faster.
Dana, there's the bullet holes right there in the front doors of the church. Those bullet holes began the onslaught as the gunman walked inside. If you pull back out here, you can show you how close Stephen Williford lives. So he ran barefoot from basically right here to this house to my right where he lives, down the street to that church, and saved lives by engaging him and shooting the shooter twice. Dana?
Adam, you're hearing even more details about what the gunman did inside the church.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting some of those details, and they're heartbreaking. One 73-year-old Sunday school teacher talks about holding another woman's hand as she was shot 4 times in the torso and died. Again, I want to go back to the church again as we toss to the next soundbite here in a second, just to give you the look of the flags, the Christian flag at half-staff, the American flag at half-staff, the Texas flag at half-staff. Another woman inside who survived, her husband also survived. Talk about just the brutality of what went on as that man walked up and down the pews and continued to fire.
Everybody started screaming, yelling. Everybody got down, crawling under, wherever they could hide. It was so scary, and that man was shooting. He was shooting hard. And I could feel the gunshots. I saw them on the carpet because they have carpet in there. I could see the gunshots, coming down.
I don't know what kind of evil, Dana, it takes for a man to do this, to shoot innocent people in a church, but to shoot crying babies, to shoot people pulling out their cell phones, and then to go back down the pews and finish off people, as one witness says, that were still begging for life in some cases.
And
back to you.
We're going to actually hear from somebody whose mother actually did survive because of that remarkable man that you're talking about, Stephen Williford, and all that he did. So, Adam, thank you so much for bringing us that report. President Trump says tougher gun laws would have done nothing to prevent this tragedy. Here's what he said when asked about it. Extreme vetting for potential gun owners.
You might not have had that very brave person who happened to have a gun or a rifle in his truck go out and shoot him and hit him and neutralize him. And I can only say this: if he didn't have a gun, instead of having 26 dead, he would have had hundreds more dead.
And are you considering any kind of gun control policy going forward?
When you look at the city with the strongest gun laws in our nation is Chicago. And Chicago is a disaster.
Joining me now is Illinois Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger, a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. So you've been there on Capitol Hill as a member of Congress for many years, and so every time there is a shooting, you see that there's calls for more gun control. But do you agree with President Trump that actually it was the mental health aspect that would have helped here?
Yeah, absolutely. You look at the fact that the Air Force should have flagged this person through the NCIS system. That's the background system. When you're dishonorably discharged from the military, when you have a domestic violence issue, that will flag you in the system, and you shouldn't be able to buy a gun. Something broke down there. You know, when he's asked about the idea of extreme vetting, it's kind of meant to to be a little too cute by half on one end and saying, oh, you have extreme vetting for these refugees. What about for gun owners? It's very different, though, because extreme vetting for somebody wanting to buy a gun, that's your right. That's your Second Amendment right under the Constitution. And so, look, we want to figure out how to give people the rights that they deserve, but at the same time understand 99.99 repeating % of gun owners are not buying guns to go use them in crimes like this. But when people do, it's great to see somebody that lives across the street from this church being able to engage back.
Let's listen to the Air Force Secretary who talked about what you were just mentioning about not flagging this for the FBI.
Well, we're looking at all of our databases and all other cases like this, and if we find a problem, we'll fix it. Now, we act in accordance with our values as an Air Force: integrity first and excellence in all we do, and that's what we're doing.
Obviously, Congressman Kinzinger, you know a lot about the Air Force. What do you think about dealing with a situation where you have a law that should have been followed or procedure that should have been followed? Could you support something like what Senator Cornyn is going to introduce today, which is to try to figure out a way to get criminal convictions uploaded quickly into the background check system?
Yeah, Heather's great, by the way. I know her. She's very good as the Air Force Secretary. But this has been a problem with the Air Force and maybe with DOD-wide for a long time. I had an issue where somebody was denied the ability to go get a mortgage loan for a house because they had something incorrectly put on their record from the Air Force, where you have somebody that should have something put on their record and it wasn't. This has got to get figured out, and it should be easy to do with the era of computers. It's not like you're having to send a hard copy paper into some central hub. Let's just get it done and make sure that people that should not be buying guns don't buy guns, because if we enforce the laws that are on the books, and there's plenty of laws on gun ownerships on the books, we can reduce this significantly.
It was just a little over a month ago that we had the massacre in Las Vegas. I know that you had put forward a request to the ATF to deal with bump stocks. Any update on that?
No, we're still waiting to hear back from the ATF. I'm afraid they're going to come back and say the technicality of the law, they're still legal, in which case it'll take legislation. But look, we have banned automatic weapons in Congress. Bump stocks get around that ban, albeit cute and technical, but it gets around that, and I don't think that should be in the hands of the average American, the ability to basically modify a bump to make it a fully automatic weapon. So it's something I hope the ATF can deal with, because then they can deal with all the new commercial products that come on the market, instead of us in Congress having to basically pass a law for each new commercial
every
product.
time there's a development.
Right.
Let me switch gears. You're also on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. We have President Trump coming up at 9 p.m. Eastern tonight, going to give a big speech in South Korea. Obviously, a lot of the focus will be on North Korea. He talked a little bit earlier yesterday, or maybe it was today, the time changes got me confused, but about the possibility of sitting down for talks. But in the past, he has said that would be useless. Do you have any information on what he would say tonight about that?
I don't know what he's going to say. I had lunch with him about, I'd say, a week ago now, and he was kind of briefing what he was going to do on this trip. And I'll tell you, he's very clear-eyed on this. I think he understands on the one end you have to be willing to use the military option, because that makes the not military option much more possible. And so I think you see a president that really is likely to use it if he has to, but wants to do everything prior. And what's going to work prior is ultimately getting North Korea to the table to force a solution. The question is, when is that timing going to happen? And we can't do it from the position of weakness like we've had, frankly, for the last couple of decades.
He also indicated that there might be some sort of big announcement coming forward, that he thinks there's a progress and a development. Do you know what that might be?
I don't know what it is, but I can tell you, again, the administration and the president have a very kind of wide 50,000-foot view of what do we need to do to compel North Korea. And I think that includes both carrots, but maybe sticks with China. And that may be what you're going to see the president talk about is, we may be willing to go pretty far with China to compel them to stop all the commerce into North Korea, because over 80% of North Korean commerce comes through that border.
All right. Congressman Adam Kinzinger, thanks for joining us today.
You bet. Anytime. Thanks.
So it's election day, and we're watching the hotly contested Virginia governor's race as voters choose between Lieutenant Governor Ralph Northam and Republican Ed Gillespie. In a state where Hillary Clinton beat President Trump, the results could get the political tone all set for next year. Peter Ducey is live in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Peter, what's voter turnout been like today?
Dana, this is the third polling place we've been to in the last 4 hours, and as far as turnout goes, we have not seen at any of the 3 stops we've made so far long lines stretching out of the door and into the parking lot, but that's not necessarily what you would expect in an off-year election. That also, though, does not mean that people here in Virginia are not excited or interested about this race, because Virginia voters have already set a record in the Commonwealth, most absentee ballots ever for a non-presidential year. And Ed Gillespie, the Republican who has tried to establish his own brand as separate from the president by never campaigning with him, has come all the way back from double digits down to within striking distance.
I feel good, and the fact is we have been gaining momentum. You can see it everywhere I go. You can see it in the poll numbers, but more important to me than the poll numbers is what I see when I'm working the shipyard gate and talking to the workers at 5:30 a.m. as they're coming in, and you know, they're for me, and that's a good sign. That's better than any focus group or any polling data you can have.
From South Korea, earlier this morning, President Trump tried to put down the Democrat in this race, Ralph Northam. He tweeted this: Ralph Northam will allow crime to be rampant in Virginia. He's weak on crime, weak on our great vets, anti-Second Amendment, and has been horrible on Virginia economy. Vote at Ed W. Gillespie today. But Ralph Northam, the Democratic candidate, sees this election differently. He thinks it's an opportunity for voters in the Commonwealth to repudiate President Trump.
Well, you know, I think they want a leader in Virginia that will stand up, one, to what's going on in Washington right now, the detrimental policies that are coming out of Washington.
Experts are watching the Gillespie campaign very closely because it could be a test tube for Republican success in next year's midterms in blue states. But one wild card today, as you're starting to see, it is raining. The weather is very bad in Virginia today, and sometimes bad weather does affect turnout. Dana.
All right, Peter Ducey, thank you so much for bringing us that story. House Republicans working to bring their tax bill to a vote next week, but some new key Republicans voicing some opposition. We're live on Capitol Hill, and we're hearing harrowing stories of survival out of Texas. What one man says happened to his mother after she was shot and thought her life was over. It's Election Day, and we're watching the governor's races in Virginia and New Jersey, both regarded as indicators of how President Trump is doing. And both contests seem to revolve around Trump, even though his name is not on the ballot. Let's bring in our panel. Michael Starr Hopkins, he's a Democratic strategist and contributor to The Hill, and Matt Schlapp, chairman of the American Conservative Union. Matt, Michael and I saw each other in the green room, and we noted that we both saw that you tweeted this morning that you voted. So you're there in Virginia. How do you think things look?
You know, Ed's really made this a race. I would say with no statewide elected Republicans in the Commonwealth of Virginia, zero, Ed Gillespie has pulled this race into a margin of error race. I think the momentum is on his side, and I think he can do it.
Michael, from a Democratic perspective, has the party been surprised that Ralph Northam didn't run away with this and that Ed Gillespie closed pretty tightly at the end?
You know, I think we all knew at the end of the day this was going to be a close race. Virginia is a bellwether state, and it's always close. It's a little disheartening to see it get this close. I think once Democrats are within the margin of error, it starts to worry us a lot, especially with the rain.
Matt, do you think that both sides will overinterpret or misinterpret the results tonight as a referendum on President Trump and what's to come for 2018?
Come on, Dana. It wouldn't be any fun if everything wasn't about Donald Trump. I mean, when I turn on the news, everything's about Donald Trump. But in all seriousness, I do think a Republican win, I think an Ed Gillespie win, and maybe even some of these other statewides at Lieutenant Governor and Attorney General, I do think it demonstrates that the political coalitions are changing. And Democrats like to look at the low poll numbers of Donald Trump. But I think what's really happening across the country is there continues to be a surge of support for dramatic change, not only in Washington, but in state capitals across this country, which is why we have 30-something Republican governors. We have Republican control in most of the legislatures across this country. There is a dynamic change going across this country.
Now, of course, there is another election today in New Jersey for the governor there. Let's listen to the incumbent who just had a little testy exchange this morning.
It's easier to sit here and complain. It's easier to sit. I don't have the money like you. Yeah, oh really? I'm sure. Easier to sit here and complain. But you know what? That's the joy of public service. It's serving folks. It's serving folks. Yeah, it's serving folks like you that is really such a unique joy. It really is. You're fabulous.
Michael, that was in New Jersey this morning. The incumbent governor, Chris Christie, probably glad that it's almost over for him.
You know, I got to say, I'm going to get a lot of flack on Twitter for this, but I actually liked Chris Christie, a couple years ago, and it's been rough watching him just kind of beat up on his own voters and really do damage to the Republican Party. I was telling you in the green room earlier, Chris Christie always wants to be a gangster while his security's around, and they're not going to be around in a couple months. So I think he just needs to tone it down.
Are you disappointed, Matt, that New Jersey wasn't even really competitive for Republicans this time around?
Yeah, of course. I mean, Chris Christie gave us all great hope. That was he was elected twice in New Jersey. We've actually had some success winning the New Jersey governorship, but I do think, look, he's the most unpopular governor in the country, and maybe these tirades play a little role in that.
But, people like it when somebody tells it like it is. Let's also listen to someone else telling it like it is. This is this morning. Donna Brazile was on CBS this morning, and it got a little heated. Listen.
I called Bernie to explain to him that there was cancer that I could not destroy. And I could not destroy it because of this memorandum. There's no question that I was upset. I was upset because we were hacked.
I read the book that you were upset with Robbie Mook, certainly. You also sound very angry with Hillary Clinton. Yes, the hacking was an issue.
My emotions are my emotions, but there's no question that I was very upset at the time.
Michael, Donna Brazile out there finding it kind of lonely out there when you go out and tell it like it is.
You know, she has. Donna Brazile tossed a political grenade, and now she wants to put the pin back in it. And I think it's a little too late. And it's sad because Donna Brazile has done a lot for people of color, women inside the Democratic Party. And I hope this isn't what she's remembered for.
Well, I certainly wouldn't count her out, Matt. I mean, you know Donna Brazile. What do you think?
I have great respect for Donna Brazile. I think she knew what she was doing when she decided to be very candid in this book. Mm-hmm. She's not going to be able to reel it back. And actually what she's talking about is a Democratic Party, kind of the elite of the Democratic Party being shown to be, first of all, not very effective, but also you talk about the collusion that's out there. There was collusion to give Hillary Clinton this nomination, and there was collusion to push her over the goal line, and the American people said no way.
Well, and now apparently there's collusion to trash Donna Brazile. So we'll keep an eye on that story. Michael Starr-Hopkins and Matt Schlapp, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Now, a live look at Capitol Hill, where Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell made some news moments ago about the Senate tax bill, and Senator Rand Paul, as we have a key Republican or two voicing some opposition to the House bill. Fox News alert, a Pennsylvania state trooper is hospitalized with gunshot wounds after he exchanged fire with a driver at a traffic stop north of Philadelphia. The suspect took off and drove himself to the hospital, where he was taken into custody. Police are investigating. President Trump's Treasury Secretary on Capitol Hill today as House Republicans mark up their tax bill. And leaders from both sides of the aisle weigh in on the proposal. Doug McKelway is live from Capitol Hill. Doug, we've already heard of one key Republican defection. What else do you know?
That's right, Dana. Congressman Darrell Issa of California has said that he cannot support the tax reform bill in its present iteration. He is among the first California Republicans to come out in opposition to the bill as it presently stands. His reason for this, he can't support the cap on SALT, the state and local tax deductions. Those deductions are near and dear to high-income earners in high-tax states like California and New York. That, as the House Ways and Means Committee entered day 2 of its contentious markup of the House tax bill, one exchange on the SALT issue demonstrated the high tension in the committee room.
Early this year, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin suggested that we need to repeal SALT to stop subsidizing states. Mr. Chairman, I have never heard anything as stupid from any Treasury Secretary in my life.
Could I just remind you,
this is not off my time, right?
Right. Just color close to the lines, but don't cross the lines.
Thank you,
Gentlemen.
I'm not crossing the lines.
Republicans are very, very cognizant that if they cannot pass tax reform by the end of this year, their majority in both houses might potentially be in jeopardy.
It's been rumored that if you don't get this done, well, you might as well give up the majority because you ain't coming back in the majority.
The House leadership warning that there are limits to their patience when it comes to this kind of Democratic obstructionism.
But we also don't want to have amendments that are designed to try and stop this process. There are a lot of dilatory tactics that people on the other side of the aisle are trying to employ to basically stop Congress from advancing. And we're not going to entertain dilatory tactics, but we're going to give the members the kind of space they need to craft their legislation.
The House Ways and Means Committee, Dan, is still sticking to its plan of reporting this out of committee by this coming Thursday.
So then, Doug, what are you hearing about the movement in the Senate?
The Senate bill is moving forward now with its own separate bill apart from the House version of the bill. And conservative Senate Republicans gathered today along with Kellyanne Conway, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, and various conservative low tax interests to tout their own bill and to say full speed ahead with it.
We know that Washington needs a sense of urgency. President Trump has called us to action. He is moving at a business pace, not a bureaucratic pace.
Senator Ted Cruz of Texas was among that group, and he urged his Senate colleagues, just as House conservatives are doing, to include in the repeal bill a version of what was in the repeal of Obamacare bill, a removal of the individual tax mandate. It is uncertain, though, whether the Senate leadership is on board with that. There's lots of skittishness among the House leadership when it comes to that. They simply do not want to revisit a repeal of Obamacare or any component of Obamacare when it failed so miserably earlier this year. Dana?
All right, it gets more complicated by the day. Doug McElway, thank you so much.
Yeah.
We have an emotional interview with the son of a woman shot in that Texas church. She was on the floor as the gunman approached to shoot her again when something remarkable happened. We'll tell you what that was. Plus, President Trump keeping his sights on nuclear North Korea as he talks about global security with our partners in South Korea.
Today, the President and I had an opportunity to talk about a range of vital economic and security matters, including our trade relationship and our joint efforts to solve North Korea's grave nuclear threat to South Korea and indeed the entire world. This is a worldwide problem.
Fox News alert. Moments ago, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says Kentucky Senator Rand Paul will return to Capitol Hill next week as he recovers from 5 fractured ribs after an assault at his home. McConnell says Paul is on the mend and will be back to weigh in on the Senate's tax reform bill, which will be released at the end of the week. Some of those wounded in the Texas church shooting now sharing stories of the horror they experienced when gunfire interrupted a Sunday morning service. Brian Yennis is live from Connolly Memorial Medical Center in Floresville, Texas. Brian.
Good afternoon, Dana. Well, 73-year-old Farida Brown is the only victim that is still here at Connolly Medical. Her son, David Brown, told us everything that she saw inside that church. It began with shots going through the window of the church, then a Sunday school teacher screaming, "Everyone, get on the ground." What else did she see while she was on the ground inside the church?
She saw the shooter after he initially stayed at the entryway and emptied, 6 or 8 clips, 30-round magazine clips, and then he proceeded to walk up and down the aisle, she said about 10-15 times, shooting everybody that was laying on the ground. And she laid on the ground the whole time and watched his boots walk up and down, and then he eventually, did a circle and then ended up at her pew, which is the very first pew to the front door. And the lady to her left, he started shooting her repeatedly. And so she held her hand, and the lady was crying a lot. And she told her, "You're going to be okay. You're going to heaven." And then he stopped shooting her, and then she knew it was her turn. So she started praying for God to take her to heaven. And then she said a gunman at the door diverted his attention, and he left, and then that was the end of the ordeal inside the church.
Unbelievable. No word on what happened to her friend on the ground with her. The hero, Stephen Wilford, was the man who ran to the church and diverted that shooter's attention, likely saving Farida.
Every time I heard a shot, I knew that that probably represented a life. I was scared to death. I was. I was scared for me, and I was scared for every one of them, and I was scared for my own family that just lived less than a block away. I'm no hero. I am not.
David says his mother said that the shooter was targeting people's cell phones, and particularly children.
She said she heard people crying and screaming, called the police, and she said it sounded like he was shooting their cell phones. It was more of a crackling sound whenever he would shoot their cell phones. And she didn't know hers was being shot up, but it was riddled with bullets when she got to it later.
We heard one survivor say that he point blank would just shoot babies that cried.
Yes, yeah. Any noise at all, whether it was babies or kids or moms pleading for their kids' lives.
A local funeral home is donating caskets for these victims so that they don't have to worry about that, these families on top of everything else. David says his mother would never even have been in that church if it wasn't for Hurricane Harvey. His mother was forced to leave Houston after Harvey because of the damage suffered by the hurricane, which is why she was in the area on that day. David is now trying to raise as much money as he can, he says, to rebuild that church. He's got a GoFundMe page now. Dana?
All right, Brian, thank you so much. President Trump hinting at progress with North Korea and calling on the Kim regime to come to the table and make a nuclear deal. Dan Henninger is deputy editor of the Wall Street Journal editorial page and a Fox News contributor. We're glad you're here. No one better. This is a big trip for President Trump. Remember, President Obama was going to do the big pivot to Asia, but is President Trump actually doing it?
Well, we shall see. I mean, the thing that President Obama did not do is pivot resources to Asia. I think President Trump's hand is being forced by the basic elements of North Korea. I mean, let's understand what's going on here, Dana. North Korea has developed an intercontinental ballistic missile, which may be capable of reaching not only Los Angeles, but Chicago. We know they have nuclear warheads. And the feeling is that within a year, they may be able to fasten a miniaturized version to the head of one of those missiles. Nothing could be more immediate nor imminent. And so President Trump has to deal with that. The American people expect him to do that. So the only leverage I think he has at the moment is, as he's been doing, the threat of military action against North Korea. And now he's there talking to his negotiating parties in South Korea, China, President Xi, perhaps Vladimir Putin of Russia, about what they are going to offer him in the way of serious diplomacy that won't force our hand militarily.
There's also a sort of a rebranding exercise going on by the Trump administration and what they're going to call the region. Listen to this.
Our alliance is more important than ever to peace and security on the Korean Peninsula and across the Indo-Pacific region. That is why Vice President Pence, Secretary of State Tillerson, who's with us today, and Secretary of Defense Mattis, who was here just a short time ago, have all traveled to Seoul in the first year of my administration.
So there what he's doing is he's not using the phrase that we're used to, which is Asia-Pacific, but Indo-Pacific. And H.R. McMaster, the National Security Advisor, before they left on the trip, said this is because we're trying to broaden the region out.
Exactly. I mean, General McMaster and Defense Secretary Mattis have both talked a lot about the need to rebuild America's alliances. And I think what you're seeing here in President Trump's trip over there is touching base with some of these potential allies, such as Vietnam, such as India, Japan, certainly, South Korea, Australia, though he's not going there. And they're trying to pull these countries together into an alliance that could sort of neutralize China's clearly explicit efforts to push their way further and deeper into the region.
Before I let you go, I just wanted to ask you about this because while the president is in Asia, we have developments in the Middle East with Saudi taking some serious actions to basically purge many in the ruling class. Here's a couple of tweets from President Trump. He said, "I have great confidence in King Salman and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. They know exactly what they are doing. Some of those they are harshly treating have been milking their country for years." Now, this story has been kind of gotten short shrift. I think this is a big development and the possibility of a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. You?
Yeah, well, look, Saudi Arabia cannot go to war with Iran. And I think possibly what's going on here is that Prince Salman is trying to force the U.S.'s hand in making a greater commitment. We know that President Trump has done things like these tweets. He went to Saudi Arabia and gave an important speech. But the United States does not yet have an identifiable or coherent strategy in the Middle East, especially with regard to Syria. And Vladimir Putin is over there. He's trying to establish Assad and create a kind of an alliance with Iran, which is Saudi Arabia's mortal enemy, and presumably ours as well. So I think what Prince Salman is doing here, not so much the arrest, I think that's internal. He's trying to modernize Saudi society.
Right.
But what's going on with the Iranians right now is to try to induce the United States to explicitly commit themselves to protecting the region. And that's probably going to mean a greater presence, something that President Trump doesn't really want to do. But I think Prince Salman recognizes the threat from Iran to the entire Middle East region.
All right. Well, we'll continue to check in with you on these important stories. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Dana.
Dan Henninger of the Wall Street Journal. The U.S. is about to find itself in a unique position on climate change as another nation is set to sign the Paris Accord. Plus, the polls are open in Virginia, where the governor's race is widely seen as a test of President Trump's political influence. South Carolina Senator Tim Scott will join me to talk about this and more. States is about to go it alone in opposition to the Paris Climate Accord. That's because Syria has announced plans to sign the deal. Until now, it had been the only UN member country not to join the accord signed by 196 nations. So this means the United States would be the sole UN member country outside the deal if President Trump makes good on his June promise to pull out. It will take until 2020 for the U.S. to fully withdraw from the climate deal. So it's Election Day in Virginia with a high-stakes battle for governor pitting Republican Ed Gillespie against Democrat Ralph Northam. Joining us now is South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. Sir, I consider you, you're probably the MVP of campaign surrogates. You're traveling all around the country. You campaigned for Ed Gillespie in Virginia. What do you think is going to happen tonight?
I'm excited. I think Ed's going to pull out this race. It's going to be very close, maybe a 51 to 49, 50.5 to 49.5. But here's the truth. Ed has been campaigning in every corner of the state. His goal is to be the governor for all Virginians, and he is proving that by the way he campaigns. I'm really excited. I was in Richmond on Saturday, having an opportunity to sit down with business owners, minority business owners. We had a great rally with traditional Republicans. Ed is turning over every stone, making sure that every single person understands his desire to represent them and to move Virginia forward together.
So Ed Gillespie has tried to appeal to everybody in Virginia, as you say, including in African American majority county, Chesapeake County. And
yes.
One of the things that this has happened in this campaign is that you had Charlottesville happen in the summer, and you had Ed Gillespie then eventually come out and talk about Confederate statues and needing to preserve the history there. Do you agree with him on that?
Well, I will say one thing without any question. Ed's response after Charlottesville was a clear repudiation of hatred and extremism. There's no question. What we have seen, however, on the left is race baiting by the folks on the left, which has been despicable. If you've seen some of the commercials run by those folks supporting his campaign, it has been impossible to understand the significant hole that the left is climbing into trying to find a way to win this race. It is awful.
Take a listen to Governor McAuliffe, who has been a good friend of Ed's for a long time, but listen to what he had to say.
But Ed, he's run the most hateful, divisive, bigoted campaign I've ever seen in Virginia history. Ed's whole campaign, he's taken this campaign in the gutter. It's the most racist campaign we've ever seen in Virginia history. That's not who we are as Virginians.
Senator Scott, do you feel like Republicans are just tarred with being racist no matter what they would do? Say these ads had never been run or Charlottesville had never happened. Do you see that as a pattern that Republicans have to deal with in every state?
Well, there's no question that the Democrats are absolutely desperate to win races, no matter the vile treatment of their opponents, no matter the lack of morality in the ad campaigns. The truth of the matter is, if you're looking for someone who has stood head and shoulders above the mess, someone who has spoken very clearly on uniting Virginians, on the common goal of moving the Commonwealth together, you would say Ed Gillespie has done a great job. When you hear my friends on the left saying that Tim Scott is a racist against black people, it is amazing to see the type of challenges that they face, and their response to those challenges is to pull out the old race card in a way that is disrespectful to those folks who paid a high price to make sure that we were all included in this amazing country.
So just a couple of hours ago, I believe you had a chance to see Senator Mitch McConnell. He talked about tax reform. Let's listen to him and then talk to you.
Certainly.
We're moving forward on tax reform here in the Senate. The Finance Committee will be rolling out their proposal, the starting place, what we call the chairman's mark, at the end of the week, so the public can take a look at it, moving toward markup next week.
How different might the Senate version be from the House version they're working on today?
There are some substantial differences. I will say that the House plan moved the ball in the right direction. I believe that the Senate plan will be a little more robust as it relates to how we help the average everyday American be able to keep more of their hard-earned paychecks. And at the same time, the second pillar, of course, is how can we grow our economy long-term and make sure that the jobs of the future are created here at home. We have some specific objectives that I think will help manifest for us those future jobs around the world being created here at home, as opposed to in those places that have a lower corporate tax rate, by becoming more competitive in that space.
All right. Well, we're watching it closely. We hope you'll come back and talk to us again. Senator Tim Scott, thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So trouble on the tarmac as a man sneaks past security and takes a joyride on the carousel. Wait till you hear what happened next. Plus, why did former FBI Director James Comey rewrite his own memo to soften the language about Hillary Clinton's handling of her emails? We'll explain next. An unidentified man at Miami International Airport walked past an unattended American Airlines counter, hopped on the carousel, and into the luggage chute. Look at that security camera footage now showing him come out the other side onto the tarmac with the neon-vested employees in hot pursuit. They were able to tackle him to the ground, and he was taken away in handcuffs. Police say this is a very restricted area of the airport, and they are investigating how he was able to get this far, so don't try that. New scrutiny surrounding former FBI Director James Comey's decision to change the wording in his closing statement on the investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server before the final copy was released. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge joins us live from Washington. What's this all about, Catherine?
Well, thanks, Dana. The former FBI director's early draft characterized Hillary Clinton's mishandling of classified information as grossly negligent, a legally significant term that mirrors the federal criminal statute. By July 2016, the phrase was dropped when Comey recommended against criminal charges.
Although we did not find clear evidence that Secretary Clinton or her colleagues intended to violate laws governing the handling of classified information, there is evidence that they were extremely careless in their handling of very sensitive, highly classified information.
The Republican chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Charles Grassley, wants more information from FBI Director Christopher Wray about who had input, and the senator wants the underlying computer records or metadata to show when and who made the edits. An FBI source attached to the case said to Fox News that it was always Comey who insisted on finding intent, even though it's not a requirement under the federal statute. Dana.
Okay, I hope they get that information soon so we can clear that up. And there's a newly released transcript from a former Trump foreign policy advisor. What's that about?
Well, this is the transcript, and it comes from the House Intelligence Committee, and it's from the interview of Trump campaign foreign policy advisor Carter Page. And in that transcript, he confirms that he had contact with a Russian deputy prime minister in July of 2016, and at least 2 campaign aides knew about it. In an email, Page wrote, "I'll send you guys a readout soon regarding some incredible insights and outreach I've received from a few Russian legislators and senior members of the presidential administration here." The email does appear to undercut Page's public statements that his trip to Moscow was not related to the campaign. And after his 8-hour closed-door session on Capitol Hill last week, Page slammed his falsely unverified Trump dossier that portrays him as Moscow's point man for the Trump team.
It was terrific to have the opportunity to help clear the record as to the falsehoods from the dodgy dossier, which started this whole thing against me in the final 2 months before the elections.
And we're going to learn soon a lot more from the Attorney General Jeff Sessions about what he knew about the trip by Page and other contacts with George Papadopoulos, the aide who has cut a deal with the special counsel, because we've got confirmation today he'll be back up on the Hill next week on Tuesday before the House Judiciary Committee. Dana.
All right, Catherine, we'll have you back then. Thanks so much.
Sure, for sure.
An emotional reunion as two heroes share their heartache in Texas. Two Good Samaritans comforting each other at a vigil for the Texas church victims. Stephen Williford, the man on the right, grabbed his rifle, ran barefoot to the church, and shot the gunman. Johnny Lagendorf, there on the left, gave him a ride to chase the killer. Williford said he was scared to death, but he overcame his fear, crediting God. Thanks for joining us. I'm Dana Perino. Here's Shep.